Hey, very excited about this presentation about Hanukkah. And let me just tell you this before we start and jump right into it. When we begin, it's going to seem like we're kind of all over the place, but there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, a lot of parts of this beautiful tapestry. It's all going to come together. You might even wonder at the beginning, what in the world does this have to do with the holiday of Hanukkah? But take my word for it. Join us for the ride. It's going to be something really spectacular, something really special. Even those who know a lot about the holiday, you're going to learn something new. I can guarantee you that. So, if Hanukkah means anything to you, if you're interested in the festival, well, this is for you. So let me just start with a little bit of a background, and that is um, the importance of mission statements. Every company has one. Every good company has a mission statement. Every nonprofit has one. And a mission statement is usually one clear sentence. Sometimes it's not even a sentence, as you'll see, it might just be a couple of words um, that tells you the reason that the organization or the company exists. And it's very important because it tells you how they're going to spend their time and how they're going to spend their resources and on what they will absolutely not compromise. So it's very, very important to understand what a mission statement is. Okay, so for let me just give you some examples from what we see in the world. So an example I have on your screen, you'll see it says JetBlue to inspire humanity, both in the air and on the ground. Okay, straightforward. We're not going to discuss that. TED, as in like the TED Talks, their mission statement is to spread ideas. The American Red Cross, their mission statement to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. Now, this is very important because it gives you focus and purpose. So, like, for example, if the Red Cross was approached by an organization that was mobilizing, but it wasn't for human suffering, it was for the suffering of animals, and the Red Cross would say, "Let's take a look at our mission statement. Our mission statement is to alleviate human suffering, and when we raise money, we ask people to donate money to alleviate human suffering, and therefore we cannot use the money raised to alleviate the suffering of animals. As important as that might be, it's not our mission statement." So now you would think, right, something as important as the creation of the world, the creation of humanity, the creation of the universe, as we see in the book of Genesis, uh, isn't there a mission statement? Wouldn't there be a succinct, a very simple way to put what our job is in this world? And if we have a mission statement, we, as the residents of the world, as the creators, as the creation of the creator, then we know exactly what we're meant to be doing here. So what are the very first word that the very first words that God says in the creation? And I think this is going to give us a hint here. So in Genesis 1:3, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Um, and it continues, God saw that the light was good. God separated between the light and the darkness. Now, this is very significant. In my opinion, this is, in my humble opinion, the mission statement of the world. Very simple. In Hebrew, it's two words, vayihi or. God said in English, it's four words, let there be light. Now, light, we have to understand here, is not a word that is commonly used in the Torah, in the five books of Moses. And this is might come as a surprise to you, but in reality, it only appears, I think, about five times in this form as the word light, Aleph Vav Resh, or it only appears here in the story of creation, and it appears only in one other context. Okay, think about it. Before I give you the answer, does anybody know what context is the word or light used in the rest of the Torah? And that, my friend, should like raise your eyebrows. It's not an unusual word, light, or it's only used here in the first few verses in the creation story, and it's also used only in one other place in the entire Torah. Sometimes you have to understand something by studying the Hebrew in the Hebrew Bible. It gives you amazing insights by simply learning and looking at the words. Forget the narrative for a moment. By looking at the words, it gives us tremendous clues and insights into things that appear beyond what the text is actually saying. So it should raise an eyebrow, it should raise a question mark. Why does the word or, light, only appear here in the first day of creation and in one other place? Where is that one other place? It appears in the ninth plague. What happens? It's the plague of darkness. And the experience of darkness from the Egyptians, as the verse says, they couldn't even feel around them. It was so thick that the darkness could be felt. I guess you could put it that way. They could feel it. And what does it say? Ulechol b'nei Yisrael hayu or b'moshvotehem. But for the Jewish people, for the Israelites, there was light in all of their dwellings. Now, it's fascinating. What is this light? What is this light that it's referring to? I mean, after all, it cannot be sunlight. It cannot be moonlight. It cannot be light from the stars. Why not? The answer is very simple, because that light is not created until the fourth day of creation. So when the first day says, let there be light, what kind of light is it talking about? Right? You're not going to Home Depot and buying a light fixture, right? So, what is the light that it's referring to in this story? So, this is key. This is critical, that the light that the Torah, that God is speaking about on the first day of creation, when he says, let there be light, right? It is not talking about physical light. It's talking about a spiritual light. It's talking about moral light. It's talking about clarity, divine clarity, spiritual clarity. As the book of Isaiah says, take a look here in our fourth source, O house of Jacob, come and let us walk in the light of the Lord, right? What is light? How is it used? Like I said, it's only used in the story of the creation and the story of the ninth plague. But once you get into the prophets, the word light does appear, and in the book of Psalms as well. So you'll see that light almost always is used, this word or is almost always used exclusively referring to a spiritual light. Look at that verse I just quoted from Isaiah, or Yeshayahu in Hebrew, right? Let us walk in the light of the Lord. It's not talking about God holding up a flashlight or God shining the sun upon you. It's talking about walking in the light of God, in the spiritual light. Another example, look at the next one. Isaiah chapter 5, verse 20. Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, right? People who confuse, have more moral confusion, that change darkness into light and light into darkness, that change bitter into sweet and sweet into bitter. So Isaiah is bemoaning those who have moral obscurity, that lack clarity, that lack spiritual clarity. They're confusing good and evil. They're confusing what's light and what's dark, right? And again, another example, look, book of Psalms here, chapter 119. Your words are a lamp for my foot and light for my path. Again, it is not talking, friends, about walking on a path that God has to give you a light bulb. It's talking about the spiritual light that our lives are lit up with the light of God. Another example here, Psalms, I declare in the morning your kindness and your faith at night. Now, this is an interesting verse. Morning, it's talking about the light of morning, even though it doesn't use the word or here, the word light specifically. But in the morning, when things are bright and light, that's associated with kindness, and night is associated with faith, because when things are obscure and not clear. So this is, in my opinion, the mission statement of the world. Let there be light. Bring divine goodness, bring divine godliness into this world. Every decision we make in our relationships, in our communities, in our families can be measured by one question and one question alone, or by one mission statement. Does what I am doing, does it bring light into this world, or does it bring darkness? And that, my friends, is, in my opinion, the mission statement of the world. Let there be light, right? And just like JetBlue and TED Talks, excuse me, and the American Red Cross that we started with, just like they have mission statements. And that is how they reflect upon what they are doing through the eyes of the mission statement. So too, that is exactly what we have to ask ourselves. And this is the key to the world: is are we bringing more light to the world, or are we bringing darkness by our actions? God forbid. So now this theme shows up everywhere, as we just mentioned. If you look at all these sources here, this theme shows up everywhere. And it's one of the most potent, powerful metaphors. It's one of the most powerful metaphors in the world, in the Torah, in the Tanach, in the Bible, because and this will carry us straight into the story of Hanukkah, and it will carry us into the story of the temple. But before we get there, we need to understand the temple itself. And that is going to be our next phase. So phase one was to discuss what the word light means in the Tanakh, in the Bible. And let's now jump into part two, or step two, which is to talk a little bit about the temple. And so here you have in front of you a picture of obviously an artist rendering. It's not an actual photograph of the second temple that stood in Jerusalem. It was destroyed in the year 70. Now, the first temple, we know, was built by Solomon, but this is the second temple. It's a massive structure on a massive piece of property. It was towards the end of the second temple that it went through a massive rebuilding and a massive upgrade with King Herod, but King Herod did not build the second temple. And it's important to understand this, because if you ask people who built the first temple, they'll tell you, oh, of course, King Solomon. But the second one, less people know. And I'm not going to tell you the answer, but I would encourage you, for those who are still listening, type it in the comments without looking at someone else to see if you know who built the second temple. A lot of people say, oh, Herod. No, Herod did not build the second temple. Towards the end of the second temple period, he fixed it up, but he did not build it. But this building, this structure, was not simply just another building. It was the beating heart of Jewish spiritual life for close to 1,000 years between the first and the second temples. It was massive. It was a stunning building. The area, when it was expanded, became the size of about 12 American football fields. It towered over ancient Jerusalem, and it was glowing with beautiful white stone and gold. And like I said, it was the beating heart of the Jewish people, until, of course, the temple was destroyed. But when Solomon built the first temple, and he dedicated it, I want to show you what he said here. Now, this is very important. Solomon says the following in the book of Kings, and I urge you to go read Kings 1, the description of what happened when Solomon built the first temple. He writes, "But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, the heaven and the heaven of heavens cannot contain you, much less his temple that I have erected." So Solomon is saying something that maybe other people were echoing in his lifetime. One second. We believe in a God that you cannot see, and we pray to a God who's in heaven, so to speak. God is everywhere. But are you telling me that now you're building a house for God, and God is going to live in this house? Now, remember, Judaism is the only monotheistic religion close to 3,000 years ago. Everyone else in the world were pagans. They believe in a multiplicity of gods with a small g. And now Solomon's building a house that was probably confusing to people, because the pagans had there were temples built to all kinds of gods. And now Solomon says here, echoing the question of the people, right? And what Solomon is basically reminding us here, right, is that the building, it's not a cage for God, it's not a house for God. And he's reflecting and saying, right, the heavens can contain God. Do you actually think that this building, this temple we built, is going to contain God? And so rather, what is the temple? It's a place where it gives people focus. It's a place where heaven and earth meet. And we see in the story in Genesis of Jacob, when he falls asleep on the place that ultimately that the temple would be built, and he has a dream. And take a look at the screen, and he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the ground, and its top reached to heavens, and behold, angels of God were ascending and descending upon it. Right? They were going up and down, and in his dream, he saw angels going up, angels going down. And what does he say when he wakes up? And I should have put it here in the presentation, but he says, this must be Ein Zeh. This is none other than the Beit Elohim, the house of God. And so, what is it? And this is the perfect imagery, angels going up and down. It's the place where heaven and earth kiss. It's the place where they rendezvous, the place where they meet. It is not the place that contains God, as Solomon says, right? But rather, it's a place where heaven and earth meet. And this is a fascinating point that I'm about to make. Listen to this, is that it says 8 times, could be more, but at least 8 times when Solomon is telling the people at the dedication ceremony about this temple that he built, it says, and you shall hear in heaven. 8 times. Why does he say that? Why doesn't he say, you shall hear us in this temple? He's emphasizing that God is not in the temple per se. It is not his house. It is not his prison. It's not a cage. We're not putting God in here, but rather it's a place that heaven and earth meet. And there we can connect in a very deep way to God. Of course, God is everywhere. But he's emphasizing here, when we pray in this temple, you shall hear in heaven. Why does he say it 8 times? I think the answer is obvious. So people don't get confused, right? So that they're not confused by the fact that they're building this home and it is really only a place for us to connect to God. So let's carry on. And so now that's step 2. Okay, step 1, to review the mission statement of the world, let there be light. Step 2 was that Solomon built this temple, and that the temple was not a place that contained God, but it was a place where heaven and earth met, and it's a place that one can come and pray to God, and God can hear you in the heavens. Okay, so that's step 2. Now, remember, it's going to come together, folks. Step 3 is that in the temple, there was something called the menorah. Take a look at the picture there. The menorah was a 7-branched candelabra. And this 7-branch candelabra was pure gold, as it says, and you shall make a menorah of pure gold. Right? It was extremely intricate, and you shall make it lamps 7, meaning 7 branches, and he shall kindle its lamps that they shed light toward its face. Okay. Now, what does this mean? Shed light towards its face. Of course, that all the 6 outer branches, and it's hard to tell in this photo, were tilted towards the center, symbolizing the idea that the light wasn't to light up like you would have a candle or a light fixture in your home, but rather the light was a representing a spiritual light. But we'll get back to that in a second. And when the the book of Isaiah says, "And nations shall go by your light, and kings by the brilliance of your shine." Okay, what is, of course, Isaiah referring to here? He's referring to what we said at the beginning, by the light of God. So this menorah in the temple, okay, what does this menorah symbolize? The light of the divine, not physical light to light up the room in the temple, but rather it's there to reflect this beautiful spiritual light that we saw when God created the world, or when we read in the book of Genesis, God said, "Let there be light." So that's what this menorah is. No question that it has 7 arms representing the 7 days of creation. We are meant to bring light into every single day, right? Day 1 through 7, and then we come back to day 1. Every day of the week, every week of the month, every month of the year, every year of our lives. We're meant to bring light into this world, God's spiritual light, and that's what this represents here. Okay, so now these ideas are very, very essential, and you're going to see how it's expressed in one moment in the temple. So take a look at this drawing I made, and I apologize for my terrible drawing, but you're going to need this to understand what I'm about to tell you. When Solomon built the temple, this verse in the book of Kings tells us as follows: He made for the house windows, broad without and narrow within. Okay, so take a look at my drawing. You're looking down. It's a bird's eye view. The blue are the walls, and you're looking, say, like you're a drone above the wall. You're looking down. And the outside, you see, it's wide. The window was wide, but on the inside, it was narrow. Okay, you see, you had the menorah on the inside, and the window though was narrow. If you were standing on the inside, it was narrow. You'd look out, and then it would be wide. Why? Now, what's my question? Why? Because in the ancient world, that's not how windows were built. They were built actually quite the opposite. Now, I wanted to get you a better picture, and this is like crazy. I was using AI, artificial intelligence, to try and generate a picture based on this verse, right? That's saying the windows were broad on the outside, they were wide on the outside and narrow within, right? And we'll talk about why that was true in the temple, why Solomon did that. But AI kept doing this. Watch. And I literally spent 2 hours. This is a window looking out. It's wide on the inside, right? But narrow on the outside. But it wasn't supposed to be. If you look at the bottom, it says narrow inside, wide outside, but it did the opposite. And I was getting so angry at ChatGPT, and I did it on Kling AI and 2 others. I tried it, and they kept saying, this is what ChatGPT said to me: "You're totally right to be frustrated. And yes, I do see your sketch clearly. I even drew them a picture of what I wanted." It says the images the tool keeps generating are doing the exact opposite: wide inside, narrow outside. And ChatGPT says, that's on me. It's my fault, not on you. The image generator is clearly stuck on a standard tunnel perspective and keeps ignoring the narrow inside and wide outside constraint, even when I spell it out. Since it's clearly not listening on this detail, the most useful thing I can do right now is give you a precise prompt. You can paste it into another image tool, right? In other words, what ChatGPT is telling me says I can't do it. Even though I know what it says, I can't generate that. Go to another generator and try and get it. So I did that, but they couldn't get it right. This is the reason they couldn't get it right, because this is how it should be. It should be narrow on the outside and wide on the inside, because in the ancient world, you wanted to bring light into the building. So it would be narrow, the light would be focused, and then it would be wide because it diffused the light and brought it into the building. But what did Solomon do? He did the opposite of that picture. He made it wide on the outside. So the light is here where it says outside, and it comes in only in a tiny spot there. Why did he do that? The answer, my friends, is very powerful. It was a demonstration that the light in the temple, right, was meant to symbolize that that light is going out, right? It is going from the inside of the temple, and it's going to the rest of the world. That light is meant to be spread to the rest of the world. And that is a very powerful message of the windows that Solomon built. He wasn't trying to bring physical light into the temple, he was trying to spread the spiritual light, which is symbolized by the menorah, which is symbolizing the 7 days, the light of creation, and to take that light and send it outside into the world. Isn't that beautiful, folks? An amazing idea. So, with that in mind, now with all of that background, we can finally jump into the story of Hanukkah. Now, before the miracle of Hanukkah comes, of course, there is a terrible crisis. But let's give you the background. Solomon, the son of King David, he builds the first temple around the year 960 before the year zero. So we're talking about close to 3,000 years ago. That temple stands, but it's destroyed in the year 586. So it stands about 400 years or so. After it's destroyed, 70 years elapse until the second one is built, and that's rebuilt in the year 516. And the temple is rebuilt, and it's standing, and we're in the midst of what's called the Second Temple period. Enter the Greeks. The Greeks conquer the known world. The empire of Greece is very powerful. You all heard of course, Alexander the Great. And it's a very powerful empire. The Greek Empire under Alexander begins spreading its new world view, okay? Its new philosophy, right? Called Hellenism. It's a culture that glorified the human body, intellect, beauty, sports, and so on. And the gods, multiple gods with a small g, of course. And what do? They come in and they paganize the temple. Eventually, they get defeated by someone called the Maccabees, who defeat the Greeks. But let's get into more of the details here. So, when Greece as an empire starts to spread, and they're trying to spread their ideas of Hellenism, right? Let's take a look at what some of those ideas are. So, number one, they believed in Zeus and a whole pantheon of gods, right? That means a lot of gods. They had a lot of different gods. Zeus is very well known, very strong, very powerful, but they had gods like Apollo and Athena, that you've, of course, have heard of these names. They've made it into the movies and so on. Okay. They believed in infanticide, that might makes right. Children who are born weak or disabled, right, didn't deserve to live. They were legally killed. It wasn't against the law. Pedophilia, nudity, relationships between grown men and boys were acceptable. They were celebrated in Greek culture. Athletic competitions were done in the nude, right? They worshiped the human body, the human form, okay? And the mind was a tool to fathom the will of nature, meaning the goal was to conquer the physical world, to analyze the mechanics, the science of reality, and perfect the human body, and to perfect and to understand nature, and to, if you will, to conquer nature, right? They saw the human mind as something that could do anything. On the other hand, you had Judaism, who was the only monotheistic religion in the world at the time. They said, no, there is not a pantheon of gods. We believe in one God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Number two, the value of human life. Even human beings that are physically flawed either have mental issues or they have physical issues. They're created in the image of God, the value of human life. Number three, Judaism believed in the holiness of the familial relationships, husband, wife, right, parent, child, honor your mother and father. And the Greeks uh, were quite the opposite of that. And four, the mind is a gift, not to conquer nature, right, but rather it's a gift to fathom the will of God in this world. So what Judaism stood for at its core and stands for till today is in complete conflict to Hellenism, to the Greek culture of the time. And this was a problem. The Greeks didn't want to kill Jews. That's the truth. They wanted to Hellenize them. They wanted them to become Greek. Now, if the Jewish people living under the Greek Empire had converted to Hellenism, to this new culture, new way of life, the Greeks would have been happy. And in fact, many Jews did that. Many Jews did comply with what the Greeks wanted, but not all of them. And the Greeks outlawed Shabbat, the Sabbath. They outlawed Brit Milah, circumcision. They outlawed the celebration of the new month. They outlawed Torah study. Anything that contradicted what the Hellenistic culture stood for, they outlawed. They placed idols in the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, the one we've just been talking about, including a statue of Zeus. They sacrificed pigs, which, of course, the Bible speaks about as a non-kosher animal, deliberately trying to desecrate everything that Israel, everything that the Jewish people stood for. For many Jews, for all Jews, this was an existential crisis. This wasn't something that they could live with, we could live with. Some Jews, they didn't confront that. They just assimilated, like I mentioned, and became Hellenists. But some fought. And that brings us to this one family. There was a priest, a Kohen. We use the word priest for a lack of a better word. But when you think of priest, often you think of a guy with a black suit and a white collar. But no, priest, a Kohen, was someone who served and led in the temple, in the Beit HaMikdash. So there was a Kohen, we're going to use the Hebrew word. His name was Mattathias, or Matidyahu in Hebrew. He lived in a town called Modi'in, which today there's a modern city of Modi'in, which is right near where the ancient city was. And he had 5 sons: Judah, Simon, Yonatan, Yochanan, and Elazar. Those were his 5 sons. Eventually, Judah would become the most well-known, called Judah the Maccabee, or in Hebrew, Yehudah HaMaccabee, right? And he had 5 sons. And here is how the rebellion, the revolt against the Greeks begin. The Greeks set up an altar in the town of Modi'in, where Mattathias was living with his 5 sons. Listen to the story, it's very dramatic. They set up an altar there in Modi'in, and they placed a pig on it, and they demanded that Jews step forward in order to prove their loyalty to Hellenism and to offer this pig as a sacrifice, which of course goes against everything that the Jewish faith believes in. So people held their breath as Matidyahu, the Kohen who had served in the temple, who's elderly at the time, steps forward, and they're shocked. What does he do? He picks up a knife to slaughter the pig as the Greeks wanted, and suddenly he turns and he murders the Greek officer. He kills him. And he screams out the words that Moses used in the Bible, in the book of Exodus, the book of Shemot, and he says, Mi lahashem Eli, who is for God, come with me. And he and his sons flee to the hills, and they start to launch a rebellion against the Greeks. Judah, who's the strongest of the sons, gets the nickname Yehudah, Judah the Maccabee. And what does Maccabee mean? So there are different theories, but it could come from the Hebrew word for hammer, makevet, I think, or it's an acronym, perhaps. Mi kamocha be'elim Hashem, who is like you among all of the mighty, and an acronym for Maccabee or Maccabee. Okay, we don't know 100% where it comes from, but either way, the name stuck to Judah the Maccabee, and they rebel against the Greeks. Now here comes a little bit of a confusing map, but they have at least 10 battles with the Maccabees, and they were severely outnumbered. The Jewish people fighting the Maccabees were very, very small in number. And it was an impossible war. It really was. And militarily speaking, they had no chance. There was no way Judah and the Maccabees and his band of, granted, very brave fighters was going to defeat the Greek Syrian army. It was the most powerful army in the world. By the way, Alexander the Great was dead, but the Assyrian Greek army was very powerful, had the most trained infantry. They had an incredible air force. No, I'm kidding. There was no air force, of course. They had elephants, they had armor, they had funding, they had strategy, they had generals, they had numbers, they had everything on their side. The Maccabees, who were they? Former priests working in the temple. They were shepherds, they were villagers, fighting with whatever they could come up with. Yet, battle after battle, what happens? 10 major battles, the Maccabees win. And you have them on the map here. This is a map of the land. It's complicated. It was nothing short of miraculous. Eventually, they liberate Jerusalem and they enter the desecrated temple. They come, and the temple that had been desecrated with gods of Zeus, pagan offerings, and they eventually come back there. But this is an incredible miracle. The many in the hands of the few, the strong in the hands of the weak. And we defeated them. It was incredible. And they get to the temple, and the temple is desecrated, and there's no oil to light the menorah. So they start the cleanup process, and they clean up the temple. And what do? They find one flask of oil, and it's enough oil to last for one day. The temple and the menorah has to be lit every day, but there's only enough oil for one day. So what do? They light it. Okay, it's only enough for one day, but they light it. And what happens? A miracle occurs. It stays lit, and it goes on and on and on, and it lights up the temple, and it lights up the world, as we mentioned, and it stays lit miraculously for 8 days. An incredible miracle. So, two miracles: the miracle of the war, the victory, and the miracle of the oil, that the menorah is lit in the temple and remains lit for 8 days. So if you take a look on your screen in front of you, and this is a photo from my house from the holiday of Hanukkah, I don't remember, a year ago, 2 years ago, that I took. This is on the 8th night of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is celebrated. One of the ways we celebrate is by lighting a menorah. Technically, it's not really a menorah, because the menorah in the temple had 7 branches. Okay. Now, this, if you count them, actually has 8. It has 8. And the 8 lights here represent the 8 days, the miracle that it stayed lit for 8 days. So this is not really called a menorah. In Hebrew, it's called a Chanukah. That's really what it's called. It's a Chanukiah, but people call it a menorah, so we can use that word too. And so they lit this, and in the temple, and once again, the beautiful symbolism that the spiritual light of God belongs to the entire world. You can try to extinguish it, but the light will always break through. And that's the story of Hanukkah. So we see, let me just summarize till here, because then we're moving into the final part. But part 1, we spoke about the mission statement of the world is to bring light to the world, spiritual light. The temple was part 2. We spoke about how in the temple you had the menorah that with the 7 branches representing the 7 days of the week, and how that light wasn't light in the temple to give them light so they can see what they're doing, but it was meant to be spiritual light of God, reflected of the 7 days of creation that goes out into the world, into those special windows built by King Solomon. That light the Greeks attempted to extinguish in their battle with the Jewish people as Hellenists, as bringing everything that was antithetical, that was opposite to God's will into this world. And then the Jewish people fought them and defeated them miraculously. And the light of the temple was once again rekindled, the important light of this spiritual light. And it's celebrated every year by lighting the menorah in our homes, or as I said, the Chanukah. How else is it celebrated? Of course, it's a festive holiday, and we eat what's called latkes. Take a look at your screen. Those are potato pancakes, really. But how are they made? They're fried. They're oily. And one of the ways we celebrate is to commemorate the miracle that the oil lasted. So we eat oily foods. Cute. That's what latkes are, potato pancakes. Another way, part of the celebration is sufganiyot, which are jelly donuts or any kind of donuts that are fried in oil. Okay. Again, the oil representing the miracle that the oil lasted for 8 days. And so it's another way to celebrate by eating the oily foods, not the healthiest, but okay, that's what we do. And there's something else called a game of dreidel. Dreidel spelt, it's not on your screen, so I'll do it for you. Dreidel. Dreidel. What is dreidel? It's a top. You spin it, it has four sides to it. And if you see it, the one on top, it's different than the one on the bottom. For those, you can see on the right in English, but the Hebrew readers can see the difference. But it says, the one on the top says, Nes Gadol Haya Sham, which means a great miracle occurred there. These are the tops or the dreidels that are used outside of the land of Israel. It says a great miracle occurred there, meaning in the land of Israel. The dreidels that are spun in the land of Israel says something different. Nes gadol haya po, a great miracle occurred here. And what is the history behind these dreidels? So while the Greeks prohibited the study of Torah, the story is that they would still study Torah, study God's word in secrecy. And if they heard, the lookouts told them that the Greek army was coming while they were studying. So they would take out these little tops and they would spin them and they would play games. So that's how, that's what they say, that the history of the dreidel. Now let's continue a little bit further. So I want to just share, I think, a very powerful message. Right? If you look at this verse from the book of Micah, it says, "Rejoice not against me, my enemy. Although I have fallen, I will rise. Although I will sit in darkness, the Lord is a light to me." So this, to me, this verse is Hanukkah in a sentence, even though it's not written in that context. But this verse from the book of Micha in Hebrew, or Micah in English, really represents to me what Hanukkah is all about. The world can push you down, right? It can knock you down. Cultures may clash, empires rise and fall, darkness can feel overwhelming, but our mission from day one is really to bring the light. Even though we're sitting in darkness, that the light can still illuminate even in the darkness, even when the enemies seem to be on top. In the absolute darkness of the Holocaust, the Jewish people still held on to the light of God. Now, this is something I was thinking about. Take a look at these pictures, right? Which one of these pictures is sunrise and which is sunset? Now, I took both these pictures, so I do know the answer. Okay, one of them is sunrise and one is sunset. But if you only look at the skies and you look at the picture, there's no way that you can tell which is which, right? So there's only one way to tell. Right? How is that? How can you tell which one is sunset and which is sunrise? Think about it before I go to the next slide because it's going to give it away. Are you ready, folks? Here we go. The one way to tell is that if you know which direction you are facing. If you're facing east, right? And we know the sun rises in the east, and you see the sun just at the horizon. It's broken through the darkness. You know that the sun is rising if you're facing east. But if you know you're facing west, then you're looking at the sun setting. And this is, I think, a very powerful idea, is that Hanukkah begins at the end of the Hebrew month of Kislev, right? It is always either the darkest or very close to the darkest days of the year. It's the days where we have the least amount of sunlight here in the land of Israel. It's very dark. And the truth is that suddenly you realize at the darkest moments that the worst of the darkness, the winter darkness, has passed. Just after Hanukkah, it starts getting light again. The days start to get a little bit longer. Even when everything looks dark. It's the darkest days of the year on Hanukkah, even when it seems to be you can't tell. But if you understand that we're facing, right, days in front of us that are getting lighter, right? Hanukkah reminds us that even in that darkness, if you're looking towards the light, right, then you are heading in the right direction, right? This is a very powerful idea. When everything looks dark, even when you cannot tell if we're at the beginning of darkness or at the end, Hanukkah reminds us that you might be facing the sunrise and you don't even know it yet. And I want to end with an extremely powerful historical, um, uh, I guess, story. I don't know how I would say that. But when the temple was destroyed, the second temple now I'm talking about, this is the Greeks are long gone. The Romans are ruling in the land of Israel. They destroy the temple and they carry off the menorah. Take a look at the left. This is an image in Rome on the Arch of Titus. This is a victory arch. When Titus destroys the second temple, right, he comes back to Rome, and in order to celebrate, what does he do? He carves images of this victory on an arch. It's called the Victory Arch, and it includes the items they carried off from the temple. The Romans thought that that was the end of the Jewish people, that it was really the end. The temple's destroyed. They're exiled from the land. And it's a message that we have defeated you. The light is gone. The menorah is no longer in the temple. But history, my friends, has a very long memory. In 1948, almost 2,000 years after that imagery on the left of the menorah being carried away, the modern state of Israel was born. It was reborn. And what symbol did we choose for our national emblem of the state of Israel? The menorah. The very same menorah that the Romans paraded down the streets celebrating that they had defeated the Jewish people and that they had killed and ended Jewish history. Yet here we are. We're alive. We're home, back in our land, thriving, while the Roman Empire is nothing more than a history lesson. And the menorah has come home. The light has returned. Once again, the Jewish people are thriving in our homeland. So is there not a better symbol, a more appropriate symbol that the state of Israel could have chosen as our national symbol than the menorah? Because it is once again standing outside in Jerusalem in front of our Knesset. We're waiting for the day to rebuild the third temple where the menorah will once again stand. But my friends, that is the story of Hanukkah in a nutshell. It's not just about a military victory. It's not just about oil and lighting a menorah in the temple. It is about the story of the creation of the world. It's about the purpose of the world, and it is about standing in light against darkness. Its message is universal. Its message is for all people. It is the battle of good against evil. It is the battle of light against darkness. And my friends, I urge you to be a part of it. Wishing you all a happy Hanukkah.